Welcome to the 76 Capital Leadership Series. My name is Wayne Kimmel, and I'm your host and also the managing partner of 76 Capital. Really excited for today's show. Have a great guest and a friend that we're going to be bringing on and to talk about all things sports betting today. But before we get started, you can always find all the things that we do at 76 Capital at 76 Capital across the internet on all the different social media networks. You can also find me at Wayne Kimmel on Twitter, and James Santor, our producer. You can find James at James Santor as well all over the internet, and he's doing some great things. Keep doing a great job back at the station, James. Really appreciate it. At 76 Capital, we're all about bringing on the executives, the entrepreneurs, the athletes who are doing the next thing in the sports business. That's what we're all about. We want to work with people. We want to meet people who are truly passionate about sports, who are smart, who are nice, and who really want to change the world and do things that others just can't even imagine within the sports industry. And that's what we have today. We have an incredible guest. His name is Joe Asher. He's the CEO of William Hill, America's #1 sportsbook operator. You can find Joe on Twitter at Joe Asher, and he's a great follow. So follow Joe, follow William Hill, and all the things that he's doing. And just really excited to be able to bring Joe onto the show. Joe has been the CEO of William Hill since 2012. He got involved with William Hill because they bought his last business, which we'll talk about. Joe also, like me, grew up in Delaware. We both went to the same law school in Delaware, and we actually met through President-elect Joe Biden. So that's one of the interesting things, how we've connected. Joe's become an incredible friend. He's been very, very generous with his network within the sports betting industry, and just an amazing, amazing connector within Las Vegas and across the whole industry, and is someone that I'm really excited to have on the show and call a friend. So welcome, Joe, to our 76 Capital Leadership Series.
Well, thanks very much. Appreciate you having me here. It's quite a build-up, that's for sure. And, people go onto my Twitter feed, it's kind of an eclectic mix of things related to Delaware, sports betting things, maybe a little bit of Joe Biden, and then the Vegas Golden Knights and random musings about the irrelevant things, I suppose.
Well, it's really interesting to follow you, and as I said earlier, Joe can be found at Joe Asher on Twitter. It's incredible all the different things, and I of course love the Delaware things. Also growing up in Delaware, and we'll get to that from some of my personal stories, which, quite frankly, Joe, I love your story and how you grew up at Brandywine Raceway. I love that because it also brings back a lot of memories for me in my childhood when I used to go out for breakfast with my grandfather at Howard Johnson's, either on Concord Pike or the one in Claymont. But then after we were done breakfast, he always took me to go check out the ponies, and we would watch the horses run early in the morning. So it's an interesting. It was something that I just can never forget. But I'd love what we do here on our 76 Capital Leadership Series is really talk about your background, what you did, and I'd love to hear your childhood and how things you grew up in Delaware and how you got into this industry.
Well, I was born in Wilmington, and my dad was a gambler, and so my earliest memories revolve around gambling. He had a newsstand in downtown Wilmington, and he used to love to go to the racetrack. And one of those racetracks, of course, was Brandywine. Right behind me, that's a print of a painting a guy did of Brandywine. And so it's a special place in my heart. But, my dad would bet on the horses. He'd play cards. He'd bet on sports. I was shooting dice in the back of a butcher shop in downtown Wilmington, when I was around 11 years old. I learned how to count cards in blackjack by reading a book written by a fellow named Ken Houston. Spent a lot of time at Brandywine in the mornings. There's nothing like a racetrack in the morning. It's really, really fantastic. And got my first job working at the racetrack when I was 16 years old, working in the publicity department at Brandywine for a fellow named Marv Bachrod, and then worked in a number of other positions at Brandywine and Dover Downs, and Harrington as well. Did some writing for the Wilmington News Journal, which is, of course, the newspaper in our hometown, and wound up being the racing handicapper in the newspaper for a period of time. So did all that stuff that was sort of central to gambling at a very early age, and so it just I learned it sort of from my earliest memories, and it's always been a passion of mine. You mentioned we went to the same law school. Somehow I managed to get through high school, and by the hair of my chinny chin, got through college at the University of Delaware, alma mater, of course, of the president-elect, and went to law school. It's now called the Delaware Law School, where you went as well, and practiced law for a number of years. But I just didn't have the passion for it, right? It's just not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so then I started trying to figure out a way to get back into the gambling business.
Well, before we leave and you go off to talking about sort of how you got into the gambling business. Also, one of the things I read, and I didn't know this, and I was reading a number of things, and I loved the podcast that you did with Jonathan Jostle from the Plaza, the CEO there. That was a really great appearance. But you also were the youngest track announcer I saw in Delaware as well.
I was. I started calling races. I think the first race I called was at Dover Downs. I was 16 or 17 years old. And I still remember the first race I had called. There was a horse named Hamburg, and there was a horse making a big move on a turn, and I had binoculars up like this, and I was so nervous. My hands were shaking, and I called, Hamburg coming up on the outside or something like that. And I was just hoping it was him, right? I was just so worried I was going to get it wrong. Fortunately for me, it was Hamburg. So I had applied to try to get the job calling races at Dover Downs on a full-time basis, but they gave the job to somebody else, but told me I could come to practice and do one race a night. So that's what I did to sort of get started, and then started calling a race a night at Brandywine, and then got the full-time announcer's job at Harrington Raceway, in the southern part of Delaware, and that was great. My first full-time announcing job, and really enjoyed that. And then I got a job as the track announcer at Foxborough Raceway in Massachusetts. So New Year's Day, 1986, loaded up every possession I had in my car and drove up 95 to Foxborough, and it was a great experience, and met some folks there who I'm still very close with today. And it was just a great job too, because really you're working 3 or 4 hours a night, and it's not really work, right? Once you know how to call a race, you never forget it. So anyway, it was great. Really enjoyed it, and within the last few years, actually, I started to come out of retirement a little bit. There's a fair in Elko, Nevada. Elko is like a gold mining town in northeastern Nevada, pretty small town, and they have a fair there in the summer. It's over Labor Day weekend, and I always go up and I call a race at the fair every year to kind of keep my toe in the water on calling horse racing. So if the sports betting thing doesn't work out, or I get I've had enough of it, I might go back to calling races.
I had no idea you were still doing that. That's amazing. That's really, really cool. Well,
there's actually a video on YouTube. You can find, if you type in like Elko County Fair on YouTube. I put one of them up there a few years ago, and it was a blast. It was great. It was great fun. My kids were there, and still doing it after all these years.
That's amazing. That's so much fun. Well, look, we know some agents out there. If you need to, get a few more gigs, we can help you with that. But this is really great, to have Joe Asher on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. Joe is the CEO of William Hill, America's #1 sportsbook operator in America. Just excited to have you on the show. And Joe, you talked about how after law school, went to go work at Skadden Arps, one of the top, law firms in the country, but it wasn't your passion. And what happened next?
Well, so yeah, I wasn't one of these guys, Wayne, who hated it. Some people go into the practice of law and they just hate it. Well, that wasn't me, but I didn't love it, and I just didn't want to do it, for the next 20, 30 years. And I wasn't one of these guys who'd want to come home and read the latest court opinions. I'd want to come home and read the Racing Form or Gaming Today, something like that. So anyway, I started trying to figure out a way to get back into the gaming business. And I had done a lot of work as a lawyer for one company in particular, and wound up getting together with the chairman of that company one night at his house in New York City, and ultimately left Skadden to go to work there with the idea of getting them into the gaming business. And so this was like end of 2002, which led to me moving out to Las Vegas in 2006. And then not long after I got out here, wound up leaving that company and deciding to start my own business.
So when you said you started your own new business in Las Vegas, was that Brandywine Bookmaking? Was that the name of the company?
It is indeed. And, one of the things when you start a company, you get to pick the name. And, I've always had this special affinity for Brandywine, all these years later. I mean, the track hasn't raced since 1989. And, I was there the day that they tore it down, and just have so many, amazing memories from the place, and some really close friends that I met, during that time. So when I was starting the company, that's what I called it.
And was one of those friends that helped you, I guess, originally start the company, was a guy that Bob Aronson was one of our mutual friends who was involved with you in that business, right?
Yeah. So I wound up. So I came up with this idea that I was going to start a sports betting company out here in Las Vegas, and started trying to put the pieces together. Wrote a business plan. Started hiring the first key people for the business. One of whom I still work closely with today, a fellow named Dan Shapiro, whose office is right next to mine out here. A fellow named Jimmy Vaccaro, a legendary bookmaker in Las Vegas. Another guy named Joe Bertoloni, who was sort of well known in the gaming industry out here. And we started this business. And of course, we needed the money to do it. And so took this business plan and then sort of pitched it to friends and friends of friends, sort of thing. And one of the guys I pitched it to was somebody I knew from Wilmington. I called him up, and he says, "Listen, for a couple of reasons, I just can't do it. But I know the perfect guy for this, and I'm going to call him. And if he's interested, he'll call you." Well, 5 minutes later, I get a phone call from Bob Aronson, who I had never met, despite the fact that we both had been in Wilmington at the same time. But anyway, I went, and Bob was actually in town, or was coming to town. I met him and his father down at the Flamingo in the coffee shop there, and kind of gave him the pitch, and he signed on as one of the investors. And then we put together an advisory board of some of the investors, and Bob was on it, and we became great friends, and remain so today.
That's such a great story, and he's such a good guy, and that's incredible. That's incredible. And so in Brandywine Bookmaking, what was that business? What was the core to that business?
Well, so the business was to run sports books for casinos who, for whatever reason, didn't want to do it themselves. At that time, the major casino companies ran their own sports books. But most of the mid-tier casinos, and certainly all the smaller ones, for the most part, not all, but most part, would outsource the business. And there were two companies who were doing that outsourced sportsbook business in Nevada at the time. One was principally focused in northern Nevada, called Calneva. One was statewide, but had the biggest presence in Las Vegas. It was American Wagering, which traded under the Leroy's sports betting name. And I thought there was room in the market for a third company. And so I went about, trying to figure out how we were going to position it differently and do it differently. And then went out and pitched the idea to a fellow who became our key first customer, who is a guy named Larry Wolf, who's in the Gaming Hall of Fame and sort of a well-known casino operator. And at that point in his career, Larry was managing casinos for financial buyers or other people who didn't want to get licensed. They would turn the gaming operations over to Larry, and he would do that. So he intuitively got the value of the outsourced type of business, and he agreed to let me run the sports books in the casinos that he was operating.
Amazing, really, really incredible. And then that business grew, and you did a transaction with William Hill. How did that all come about? William Hill, maybe just to share with our audience, Joe. How did you connect with William Hill? And William Hill wasn't doing any business in the U.S. at the time, right? Before they started working with you, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I should also, we talked about Elko earlier and calling the races in Elko. So a lot of figuring out the business was on a trip to Elko with Larry Wolf. I had never been to Elko. He had some properties that he owned there. We went out to Elko, and it's become a real favorite of mine. And so the first sports book that we opened was on July the 1st of 2008, initially at a tiny motel type place that had a non-restricted gaming license called the High Desert Inn, and then across the street, the Red Lion Inn, where we still operate today. And so, fast forward, so that's 2008. We built it up. We're running the sports book, I think it was for 17 locations. And then I got hooked up with a company called William Hill, which was a very big bookmaking company that was based in London, founded, ironically enough, by a guy named William Hill. But he had in the 1930s. So and so he had long passed on, but the brand is a very well-known brand in the UK. And the CEO of William Hill at the time was looking to expand outside of the UK and into America specifically. So I got hooked up with him. They hired an investment banker to kind of introduce them to people. And that's how the process all started with William Hill. And they wound up buying Brandywine, my company, as well as the other two that I mentioned earlier, Calneva and American Wagering. They bought all three businesses and then combined them with under the brand of William Hill, with resources from the parent company in the UK. And so it was a classic roll up. And it was something, when I was running Brandywine, I thought, man, it'd be great if I could buy Calneva or if I could buy American Wagering. But we just could never get it done, in no small part because nobody, it's very hard to negotiate, that sort of a deal with a direct competitor in a small market. But William Hill was able to do that from the outside. So wound up signing the deals to sell the company in 2011. And then, of course, they had to get licensed by the Nevada Gaming Commission. And that was about a little more than a year, 14-month process before they got licensed. And the deal closed in the summer of 2012.
Amazing. And then you became the CEO of the overall company at William Hill.
I became the CEO of the U.S. business of William Hill, reporting to the then CEO of the parent company. And obviously radical shift from being small business owner of a business that I had started, to working for a very big company, and had no idea how long I'd stay. I kind of agreed at the outset I'd stay for a respectful period of time, with somehow somewhat undefined, I suppose. And then we'd kind of see how it went from there. And here we are 8 years later. So it worked out okay.
Well, it's fascinating and really excited to have Joe Asher on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. It's really awesome to have you here, Joe. And Joe's sharing with us his story, but his story also lines up very nicely with all the things that have happened in the United States around sports betting. So if I understand correctly, when William Hill bought Brandywine and your competitors and you became CEO, you were operating sports books in Nevada at the time, right?
We were operating sports books in Nevada. And then we also had a contract with a company called Scientific Games that had a contract with the Delaware Lottery. At that time, the Delaware Lottery under one of the exemptions to the federal law called PASPA, was offering parlay betting on NFL football. And so it was just NFL football, no college, no other sports, and it was only 3-team parlays or more. But still, it was a business that I loved because it was in Delaware, right? So I got to go back to my, to my hometown and just took a real passion in that, particular relationship. But beyond that, it was strictly Nevada.
So, and Nevada at the time was about overall about a $5 billion industry. Would you say that the overall sports betting industry around that number?
In terms of the handle, perhaps. Yeah, if you look at revenue, which is ultimately what matters, I suppose, the revenue at that time was probably around plus or minus 200 million.
Okay. So this, you mentioned PASPA, which was the law that was overturned by the Supreme Court on May 14th of 2018. But before that, you and many of your colleagues and I'd love to hear how you were involved in the process of this. I mean, did you have any involvement with the case itself? And then, because right away, it's really incredible to see how fast you and your team were able to really build out a presence all over the U.S. in the states that now are legal.
Well, Wayne, there's a guy in New Jersey called Dennis Drazen, and Dennis is the real mastermind behind the eventual overturning of PASPA. Dennis is a lawyer and runs Monmouth Park Racetrack. It's owned by the state, but a company that he's involved with runs it for the Thoroughbred Horsemen, who have the lease from the state of New Jersey. And Dennis is a very smart guy and was sort of instrumental in coming up with a legal strategy that eventually led to PASPA making its way to the United States Supreme Court. And it was a long process. It went on over 6-7 years, starting in large part with a referendum that got on the ballot and was approved by a 2-to-1 majority, where the citizens of New Jersey wanted legal sports betting. And then Governor Christie took up the fight in the courts. The sports leagues immediately, so the legislature passed a law after this referendum. And the sports leagues went into court to challenge the law and saying that it violated PASPA, which led to a years-long court fight. And Governor Christie, to his credit, instead of dealing with the litigation on the cheap, I suppose, he went out and hired one of the top lawyers in the country, a fellow named Ted Olson, and the team that Ted put together at Gibson Dunn, including a guy named Matt McGill. They did all this amazing work on the case. And Ted Olson, at one point, he had been the Solicitor General of representing the United States government in the Supreme Court. Ted was the lead lawyer in the Bush v. Gore litigation that settled the election in 2000. And so this top heavyweight lawyer, who I subsequently got to be friends with, and he's a wonderful guy. But the really amazing thing about this is the state of New Jersey in this litigation kept losing in the district court in New Jersey, in the Court of Appeals. And then the Supreme Court, I think, denied to hear the case at one point. And then, the legislature wound up passing a new law that Dennis was involved in the drafting of. They lost again. And depending on how you count it, the state of New Jersey was something like, 0-7 in court, or 0-8 in court on this sports betting case. And Governor Christie, to his credit, he kept going, right? Loss after loss after loss. He kept going. And all the while, Ted Olson was prepping this so that the United States Supreme Court might agree to hear the case. And lo and behold, they did. And of course, once they even agreed to hear the case, you got pretty excited about it because, they get thousands and thousands of requests to hear cases. And then, they pick about 100 or so every year, and they picked this one. And that led to the case being heard, and I went down to Washington to watch the argument, and wound up just sitting next to Dennis during the argument, which was great, and to be in that majestic courtroom in our nation's capital. And then actually went to lunch with that Ted had put together afterwards, and Governor Christie was there as well. So it was a real fun day, and you had a great feeling that day in the courtroom, man. You really felt good, and you thought there was a real good chance that the Supreme Court was going to overturn the statute. And then, of course, several months later, they did, and that opened up the entire wave of investment and job creation and tax revenue that's flowing from the legalization of sports betting.
It's an amazing story, and it's so many interesting details that I didn't even know that you were involved with, and that's incredible. I mean, I think, Joe, you're now known. I mean, it's interesting, right? Sports industry. So many people in the sports industry kind of gave like the high to people in the sports betting industry up until the repeal of PASPA, and now you're looked at as one of the most influential people in all of sports, and you just got that award again from Sports Business Journal. So congratulations on that. And I think it's really incredible to see what's happened now here in December of 2020 with 25 states that have passed legislation, plus DC and Puerto Rico. And it's really exciting to see where things have really gone. And I think one of the things that I'd love to have talk about is your deal that you did in DC with Ted Leonsis. And I'll never forget, I was in a hotel room in somewhere where prior to PASPA we were flying around all over the place, right? And I'm in a hotel room, and there you are, you're on CNBC with Ted Leonsis talking about this really groundbreaking deal that you did. Love to hear more about that.
Sure. So in DC, the city council passed a law and legalizing sports betting, and there's no casinos in DC, and so the legislation gave a license to the lottery to operate sports betting, but it also allowed the arenas in DC to operate sports betting, and of course, perhaps the most prominent arena in DC is the Capital One Arena. It sits sort of almost equidistant, I suppose, between the White House and the U.S. Capitol building. Sits on top of one of the busiest subway stations in the country, right? The Gallery Place subway is right underneath the arena, and so it's just a tremendous location that this place has. And so they had the right to operate sports betting, and it's just kind of a funny little story. They put out an RFP. Soliciting proposals to run the sports betting, and Dan Shapiro, who I mentioned earlier, who had founded Brandywine with me and continues to work with me to this day, told me about the RFP. And I said, don't even bother to respond. I said, we're never going to get that deal. MGM, has a casino that they just opened, 15, 20 minutes away, the National Harbor, which is a beautiful casino, and they're a major sponsor in the building of the Capital One Arena. And of course, Ted was one of the investors in DraftKings as well. So I just thought, there's no chance we'd wind up getting the deal. And so I told Dan, we shouldn't even bother to respond to the RFP because, he was super busy doing a lot of things. Well, fortunately, Dan didn't listen. And, when you've worked with somebody, long enough, when you have to listen and when you don't. And so he didn't listen. And then, the day before it was due, he hands me this beautiful RFP response that was all done. And so we submitted it, and then, they invited us out to meet the team, and it was great. I thought, there's no chance we were going to get the deal, but then, we met the team, and they were clearly interested in it, and the presentation went really well, and we got real excited about it. And anyway, one thing led to another, and we wound up striking a deal with Ted and his team there, and it's a great team, great group of people. It's a wonderful partnership. We really enjoy it. In fact, I was talking with Jim Van Stone yesterday, who runs business operations for Monumental, and they've just been tremendous partners. We opened up over the summer, obviously, we're working on building out a sports book there, and it's in an old restaurant that they got the space back, and so we're working on building out a high-end sports themed restaurant bar concept where you could actually bet. COVID hits, initially things grind to a halt, as they did back in March. But we wound up opening up a temporary facility in the box office, right? Because no sports going on in the building, so not a lot of activity in the box office. And so we refashioned the box office into a sports book. And it opened up over the summer, and it's just been this big hit. I mean, people are coming in. There's a line on weekends that goes, outside and down the block. And it's proven to be a great success. The work is ongoing on the permanent venue. Ted and was just a great partner during the COVID period. And, we were both, understood that we needed to, adjust for the immediate term, but, nothing was changing about the long-term vision of it. And so, if anybody's in DC watching this, they ought to, go over to the Capital One Arena and make a bet on the games coming up.
Absolutely. Wow. I mean, I've seen pictures of the lines. It's incredible. So congratulations on all that work.
Well, and it's not as though, Wayne, thank you. I mean, and I think there's we got 7 betting windows open inside, and what used to be box office windows, and then there's 14 kiosks as well taking bets. So it's not for like a shortage of bet taking capacity on our end, right? But you still get these lines, and there's room to queue inside the building, but people are keeping distance and they're wearing the mask and following the the protocols. But it goes out the building and down the block and sometimes around the corner. It's crazy.
Well, look, a place is good if there are lines, right? I mean, it's like the club. If the club doesn't have any lines, no one's going, right? So it's really exciting. So you've done so many things, and now you have this really exciting deal that you're in the middle of right now. First of all, you bought the CG technology platform over the last year. You're now involved with Caesars and tell as much as you can share with what's going on with that. I mean, that's really exciting. It's sort of the next phase of things that you're doing with William Hill.
Well, the story goes back a few years. So there's a company based in downtown Reno called Eldorado Resorts, which at the time had 1.5 casinos in downtown Reno, right? They owned the Eldorado. They owned a 50% interest in the Silver Legacy. And then they had a casino down in Shreveport, Louisiana, but, small company. And Calneva had run the sports book inside the Eldorado for a number of years. And so that was one of the deals that William Hill took over. And so we got to know the Carano family through running the sports book for them. And then they decided to go big, and so they started. A fellow named Tom Reeg, who had been an advisor to the company, joined as CFO, and they started doing deals, buying more casinos, including buying the other half of the Silver Legacy from MGM, as well as Circus in downtown Reno. And as they grew, our relationship with them grew. We started. We did a deal to run the sports book at the Silver Legacy and at the Circus, and they wound up acquiring some casinos where we were already running the sports books, and we just had this great relationship with them. And then post PASPA being overturned in 2018, they were looking for a nationwide sports betting strategy. What are they going to do? Is sports betting spreading to the new states? And of course, we were looking to try to make sure that we could get into all these new states and looking for a partner. And so when we did the deal, I think they were operating something like 25, 26 casinos in 13 states. And so we did this deal with them a little over 2 years ago, where we became their exclusive sports betting provider at all the casinos they own and any casinos they might acquire in the future. And in exchange for that, They got 20% of the William Hill U.S. business, and they got $50 million worth of shares in the parent company. And so that deal from our side was predicated on the fact that we knew that they were going to continue to grow. And we always thought that there was a chance that one day they might own all or a part of Caesars. There was an overlapping investment base. Tom, who I mentioned earlier, had started as a CFO. I think he had become the CEO of the company, or shortly after we did the deal, he became the CEO of the company. And we knew they were going to continue to be acquisitive, and clearly their success was obvious to anyone who follows the industry. So fortunately, for us, they in fact went ahead and they bought Caesars and merged with Caesars. And we were just riding on their coattails right up through that. And as a result of them acquiring Caesars, then they rebranded themselves as Caesars. And that's how William Hill came to have the rights to run the sports books at Caesars. And, look, we've had a lot of expansion across the country, both with, El Dorado and Caesars properties, as well as, other partners, such as Dennis Drazen at Monmouth Park and our friends in Iowa at Prairie Meadows. And so while we've had all this expansion, I got to tell you, it was pretty special going into Caesars Palace when we took over the operation of the sports book there, right? Caesars Palace is literally the most famous casino in the world. And so when I was a little boy watching sports as a kid, or watching some of those iconic prize fights, involving Muhammad Ali or Joe Frazier, George Foreman, it was live from Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. Or when you used to see Evel Knievel, jumping over a whole bunch of buses in the parking lot of Caesars Palace, right? And so, and of course, the pop culture fame and the Hangover movie. Anyway, it was real exciting for us to be able to operate the sports book at all the Caesars properties, but certainly at Caesars Palace as well. And so, anyway, we'd had this really warm, productive relationship, and now we're in the next phase of that relationship. For sure, Caesars made a bid to buy William Hill a couple of weeks ago. It was approved by the William Hill shareholders by the legal threshold was 75%. Had to approve it, and it was way over that. And so now we're in the regulatory approval process. There's a bunch of regulatory approvals that are needed as well, and hopefully we'll get to the finish line towards the middle or maybe even a little sooner next year.
Well, it's amazing, and congratulations on all those amazing things that you've done so far. And we're here with Joe Asher, the CEO of William Hill, America's #1 sports book, on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. And Joe, I remember the weekend after PASPA was overturned, we were together in Las Vegas, walking around soccer fields at your kids' soccer games. And you said, just come out, we'll talk. And the next thing we know, I think we walked for hours, right?
That's something. Yeah, I kind of felt bad about that. I probably gave you a little more than you had bargained for, and it was pretty hot, as I recall. My weekends are consumed with kids' sports, and you were in town, so I definitely wanted to make sure we got together. And so, one of the things that I do at soccer is oftentimes I'll just walk laps around the field. I'm getting a little exercise. I'm not yelling as much at what's going on. And so I dragged you out there, and we went quite a bit, as I recall. In fact, I think we went from one field, the Betty Wilson Soccer Complex, over to the KZ Soccer Complex, and I still had you walking. But you were great, man. You kept going.
Well, it was fun, and it was amazing because it was also, I believe it was that afternoon was the Preakness. And you were at one point you're like, hold on a second, I got to talk to my guys because we got to think about the Belmont. What are we going to do with that? And it was just fascinating things that you get to do within your world at William Hill. So that is amazing. And we also had the opportunity to go and sit in your incredible seats at the Vegas Knights games. And I'd love to know from your
Yeah.
perspective, growing up, in Delaware, being a Philly fan, now you're in Las Vegas, you have a professional sports team, which the fact that you had one, now you have the Raiders, it's incredible. What has that been like to be around all this for you, your kids, your family?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, the Golden Knights phenomenon in Las Vegas is very hard to explain to someone who doesn't live here. I mean, they just became all the rage, and my kids didn't even know what ice hockey was before the Golden Knights came. Right? They'd watch football on TV, and I was getting them to be Eagles fans, and we'd watch, basketball. They knew what baseball was. There's kids who play flag football in the park by our house on weekends. Now my son's playing, but they literally didn't know what ice hockey was. And now they're all rabid fans of the Golden Knights. I mean, everybody in Vegas loves the Golden Knights. Going to the games is just an unbelievable experience. And I'm just so appreciative that Gary Bettman brought a franchise here. Jim Murin had a huge role in making that happen and convincing Gary to do it. But it's just been such a wonderful thing for the community. I mean, I heard one day, William Karlsson, who's one of the more popular players on the team, I heard he was at Target, and it was like all the rage on social media. It was almost like, the Beatles had come to New York. I mean, it was just like crazy, because Karlsson was at Target, or this guy's at the supermarket. Everybody loves, the Golden Knights out here. And the Raiders, I mean, first of all, what an amazing thing for the NFL to come to Las Vegas. I mean, look, Wayne, it wasn't all that long ago when the city of Las Vegas was not permitted to advertise during the Super Bowl because the NFL did not want to be associated with gambling. Right? It wasn't even like bet on sports. It was just whatever what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, and that advertising was not allowed to be shown during the Super Bowl. So to go from that to a 31-1 vote to approve a team moving to Las Vegas, and to put it, a stone's throw from the Las Vegas Strip, and it's a beautiful stadium. I mean, I went toward the stadium with Mark Bedane, the president of the Raiders, and it's just, as you'd expect, it's an amazing, beautiful stadium. And obviously we all can't wait until that stadium can be full and T-Mobile Arena can be full once again for these games. But it's super exciting having professional sports in Las Vegas. A lot of people, they just think of Vegas as a tourist destination, but there's a real community here and a great community of people who are raising their families like we are. Doing the things that people do across the country, whether it's soccer on the weekends or flag football, and the community just for the community to have these wonderful sports is just fantastic.
Well, I like how you said raising our families how we are. Well, a lot of my guys, including Brian Musburger and the VC guys, they keep telling me that I need to move out there. So someday. We'll see.
You're right. You do. It'd be great. It's great. It's a great place. It's a wonderful place to raise a family and to live. And you can't beat the weather, and there's so much to do, and it's great. It's a great place.
Well, you've been on and as we start to wrap up our conversation here with Joe Asher, the CEO of William Hill, and again, thank you so much for being on the show. And you touched on something really interesting about the fact that there's having the Raiders move to Las Vegas. One of the things that we talk about at 76 Capital a lot is the fact that prior to PASPA being overturned, right? People in the sports industry, they weren't even supposed to know people like you, right? They weren't even really. God forbid they walked into a casino, a sports book, and man, if they placed a bet, then all hell broke loose, right? So what has this been like since May 14th until now, this incredible change where everyone wants to know who Joe Asher is. Everyone wants to talk to you and Dan and as well as all of your everybody, all your friends in the industry and everyone else that you've been involved with. Well, what's that been like?
Well, look, it started before PASPA was overturned. The leagues, I think, were starting to reassess sports betting. And of course, Adam Silver wrote that op-ed in the New York Times where he said it was time to reconsider being opposed to sports betting and think about the benefits of a legal and regulated market. And the thing about that editorial was, he just didn't wake up on Tuesday and decide to write it. It had been very well researched. So a lot of the work was done in advance of that. I think, a lot of it was sort of demystifying the sports betting business for folks who either worked in the leagues or at the teams, right? And kind of moving away from, the image of what sports betting was maybe in the movie Casino, to what it is today, right? I'm sitting in a, ordinary office building, off of the 215, sort of the beltway that surrounds Las Vegas. We share this building with Wells Fargo and New York Life. And it's, it's sort of a, corporate, type of an environment. We've got a tech hub, that's similar to other, tech type hubs that you see companies having across the country. And so I think a big part of it is just, demystifying it and people understanding that this is a business like any other business. It's incredibly heavily regulated, and the principals involved go through rigorous background investigations in order to have the positions that they're in. The alternative to that is an illegal black market, right? Like the one that my dad, he used to bet with his bookie, who had a little storefront location, near 8th and Orange Street in downtown Wilmington, right? It was this guy named Tony Fernakis, and he was my dad's bookie. And Tony's long gone, so it's not like I'm outing him but and there's like thousands and thousands of these guys, and then you have the whole offshore market, right, where there's no transparency at all, no regulation, no taxation, important from a government revenue perspective, and no way for the sports leagues to really know what's going on in their games, versus the legal and regulated market, which you've seen now. And so it's been great to see the embrace of sports betting. I mean, we've gone from fighting in court for all those years, Wayne, to a sports book inside the arena with, no less a prominent owner, as Ted, who's clearly one of the leading figures in sports on the topic of sports betting and making sports interesting for the next generation, as a partner. So it's great to see how far we've come. And then I got to tell you, the real exciting thing is, what's the future look like? We're just not even scratching the surface of where this business is going to be if you look out 5-10 years.
Well, that was my last question for you, really where things are going. I mean, that's one of the big things that we're all about at 76 Capital, is really thinking about the future, investing in those entrepreneurs that are thinking about that and really building things. And certainly you, as have been an incredible trailblazer and entrepreneur in the sports betting industry. Where do you see the next 5 years?
Well, I think you're going to see continued expansion in the various states, because the rollout has gone, incredibly well thus far, and I think you're going to continue that as new states come online right early in the new year. Michigan, the retail betting is currently legal, but the expectation is it goes online. Virginia is not far behind. There's bills percolating in places like Ohio, and there's always talk around New York, and so you're going to see a continued expansion of it. I think the product is also going to really evolve, and ultimately, I think over time, product wins in this space. Right now, there's a lot of marketing. Some companies are spending tremendous amounts of money acquiring customers, but the product ultimately is going to be so important, right? You're going to see the games, streamed into the betting app, for instance. So folks who are watching the game on their phone perhaps can bet in play on that same screen. Personalization, AI, all of these things are clearly coming, and the embrace of sports betting from the broadcasters who have viewers to bring to sports betting companies is so important. Of course, you're an investor in VSiN, which has done a really good job of establishing itself as a place for sports betting information, and I think you're going to see a lot more innovation around this space as we go forward.
Well, we're certainly excited for that, and we're waiting for all of that and investing in the entrepreneurs who are doing that. And it's great to have you on our show, Joe. Congratulations on all of your success and all the things that you've done at William Hill. And again, also on this, your latest award, this is the Sports Business Journal, award, which is pretty incredible. Being one of the most influential people in sports, it's been awesome having you on our Leadership Series show. So thanks so much for joining.
Real pleasure. Thank you, Wayne.
Absolutely. So thanks again to having Joe on our show. I'm Wayne Kimmel, your host. You can find out about all the things that we do at 76 Capital, as well as all the great shows like the show we just did with Joe on our 76 Capital website, all our social media. James, great job back at the station. Joe, again, thanks so much for joining us, and everyone have a great day.